Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. It's Thursday night, so that means that we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, source of all my good. And as Pabunka Rinpoche says, begging for a mountain of blessings. We make these supplications that we find in each of these stanzas so that we can truly realize the points that are made within each of them. Because if we were able to have the realization that's presented in this incredible, very summarized 14 stanzas poem, we would be Buddha. So if we could somehow or another figure out the intent, figure out the meaning contained within each of these little things, these 4 lines by 4 lines by 4 lines by 4 lines, if we could figure out and extract the meaning from them and integrate them into our lives and make them realizations, make our minds operate the way these stanzas say, then we will become Buddhas, and we will become Buddhas in the quickest way possible because we know that we have access to the swift path. We have access to those teachings, which are like an airplane. Once we've achieved the foundational kind of practices that allow us to get into that airplane of the resultant vehicle of Tantrayana. But the resultant vehicle of Tantrayana isn't something we can practice without having the foundational things in place. But the good news is we have all of the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium and great capacity related to the perfection vehicle that serve as our basis and understanding for our ability to get in the swift path and then get into a place where we can become even a Buddha in this lifetime if we can utilize the subtle body in some way and transform it into the bodies of the Buddha. So before we talk about those kind of detailed things, we need to know what the ingredients are that are necessary for us to take, for us to put together, for us to make our minds start to be like those ingredients that get put together and form basis for this basis, for that basis, for that basis, that eventually serve this as this perfect, beautiful basis that has this calm mind, this mind that has definitely wants to get out of cyclic existence as its foundation, coupled with this mind that then helps and that is the basis for the generation of bodhicitta, the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that allows one as a bodhisattva to truly utilize all of the teachings that Lord Buddha gave in the fullest capacity and fashion, and to practice the 6 perfections in the most skillful way possible, because we're living in a time where among the thousands of Buddhas that'll come, only a few will teach Tantrayana, and we're living in a time, we're so fortunate to be here when these kind of teachings are present in our world, not only the Mahayana teachings, but the perfection vehicle and the resultant vehicle teachings. So this text encompasses not only the perfection vehicle teachings, but the resultant vehicle teachings as well. But Lama Tsongkhapa shows us very clearly that the foundational practices are necessary in order to practice that very swift path, that airplane path, the path of Tantrayana, Vajrayana, the resultant vehicle. Once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest of all doors to come in for the fortunate and good. So we see that all of the things that we're learning about, all of these teachings that we've learned about shared in common with beings of small capacity and medium capacity, and now we're learning about the teachings for beings of great capacity, and we just went through bodhicitta, aspiring bodhicitta, and engaged bodhicitta, and now we're talking about calm abiding and special insight. All of these things, all of this kind of language, this lexicon, all of these points and the meanings of emptiness and so forth that we find is compatible in terms of bodhicitta, and the emptiness that's understood in the perfection vehicle is very, very compatible and carries over into the perfection vehicle. And that's why it says, once I practice well, the path shared. And when we look at bodhicitta, and we look at the various texts on bodhicitta, it says, in dependence upon thinking about our own sufferings, and dependence upon understanding what we really have to go through, we then can generate this mind that desires to help all sentient beings. So we see there that there's a qualifier for our bodhicitta, and that's renunciation. And then there's a qualifier for our renunciation, and that's, coming to understand that there's, the lower realms and the higher realms. And first, we want to get out of the lower realms. We see the animals among us. Would we rather, be an animal, or would we rather be a human? We start to kind of think in these terms at first. And then that serves as our, basis to say, okay, if I'm going to be in cyclic existence, I want the best I can get. And the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity show us how to do that. And then the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity show us the downfall of that kind of thinking. So we see how all of these practices serve as foundations for one another and serve as kind of are required for the fruition of these beautiful minds that come later on in the Lam Rim. As we read through the Lam Rim, as we do glancing meditations through the Lam Rim, we see all these various aspects of mind and these cognitive states and these affective states of mind that are created through this pathway. But it's so clear that we have to really have a good understanding, this wisdom arisen from hearing and learning and so forth, and come to really get to know this stuff well enough to even begin to say, oh, there are future lives where I could go to the lower realms. And, oh, there are previous lives that, are kind of creating what I have now. And I should be so glad that I have what I have now, because it's difficult to obtain and easily lost. And all of this kind of talk that seems so basic and introductory. But in order to actually even come to the point where we say, hey, I don't want to be a worm in my next life, and hey, I have this human basis that's really hard to get, that's got this special qualities that will let me not be a worm in my next life. Figure out how to not be a worm in my next life. Just that basic understanding right there. Forget all of these, let's get out of samsara and what's the origin and the 8 and 6 and 3 sufferings. Just that basic understanding alone that, hey, I'm in a good position right now to not be a worm in my next life, not be, an ant on a very hot surface somewhere in my next life. Just that basic understanding is such a high realization compared to where I normally fit in terms of my mental state during the day. My mental state during the day seems very fixed on Jeff and now, and this kind of idea of this kind of permanent, unitary, independent Jeff that's kind of cruising around. And then when I start to try to think about this idea of future, I just kind of still put my own personality onto my future life, as if this personality figure person and kind of all of the things that I have around me will all feel kind of the same, but it'll just, be different a little. Like I don't even come to terms with usually this idea that the next isn't how I cling to these aggregates as Jeff. The next could be, like I'm saying now, a worm or an ant walking around, no idea of Jeff, but will think I'm worm based on the aggregates that I have, or think I'm ant based on the aggregates of ant, the parts of ant, the consciousness and physical parts of ant in my future life. Say I die, become an ant in my future. I won't remember this Jeff guy talking now. I'll just be ant, and I'll believe that's me. And I'll believe it's me as much as I believe this is me now. And this is the problem. The concrete I of the ant, the concrete I of Jeff, the concrete I that just walks around and feels so solid and feels so put together, feels so static, and feels so always. So not only does the small scope teaching help us to look at a very basic principle that we want to go higher than lower, it makes us start to loosen our grasp on this is it. And that's why at the beginning of Sachen Konga Nimpo's Parting from Four Attachments says, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. It's because until you start to think of the idea that this Jeff person, self, Jeff I'm thinking right now, isn't always going to be and could not be in a moment or two. And in that moment or two, then there's going to be some kind of an exit out of this Jeff. And with that exit is going to come all of the memories of Jeff. And a subtle consciousness is going to exit. There's no longer going to be this Jeff, I'm Jeff, and I live in this house and all of this stuff. That consciousness that thought it was Jeff is going to eject, and then I'm going to think I'm something else, and it's going to be a bardo, apparently they say, an intermediate state where I'm not going to say, oh, Jeff, woo, Auntie M, woo, intermediate state, it's Jeff. It's not that anymore. A Jeff is left behind, and this kind of idea of Jeff and all of the things that go around Jeff, that, you know, the relativity of Jeff that makes me who I think I am right now, everything just goes chaos and changes. And I cling to and grasp at me as being something else altogether, but it's still a me, just not the me I'm thinking now. And that Amy will think it's the me, and samsara will just keep going and going and going. And this grasping at the I as being inherently existent, phenomena as being inherently existent, is what keeps it going and going and going. And what I'm talking about is the most coarse form of this grasping that we could even come up with pertaining to the person, this idea of permanent unitary independence, is that kind of idea, you know, this kind of gross idea that sounds so silly. We know we're not permanent. Come on. You know, we know we're not just this kind of one independent thing, but we think we are usually. But when we really think about it, it seems silly. But then when we go about our day, it seems like how we just go about our day, and we don't think about it. So the Lam Rim causes us to kind of have a pattern interrupt in the way that we normally adhere to things. And that pattern interrupt allows us to begin the process of undoing the reality that we cling to that's wrong, and then creating within our mind a reality that tallies with actual reality. So this is all we're trying to do, is trying to evolve our minds out of this kind of clinging in ways, in various ways. It's not just this grasping a true establishment. It's this clinging to the idea of, I'm not going to even die. You know, we don't think about impermanence. Gross impermanence is something that we just even close our ears to. We'll go to a funeral, or we'll hear of a friend from our school days, college. I didn't go to college. Our school days, right? That pass away, our same exact age. And then we think, oh, the family, we barely even know these people half the time. Really, we went to school with them for 5 minutes. We barely even know who they are. But we go into this like, oh my gosh, the family, and how can you imagine, you know, like it's something that's a surprise, first of all, you know, in our minds. And we don't in any way relate it to ourselves. Arya Deva says this is the crazy part about us, is that we see all this death happening all around us, and we say, oh, my son, and we say, oh, my friend, or oh, this happened to them, but it's not a cue. It doesn't cue us at all. It doesn't put us into our lives really into any more perspective. And if it does, it's a hollow way for the day or for tomorrow. Oh, really? Yeah, you know, man, you know, really, you know, anytime we can go, you know, talking after a young person's funeral. Wow, we've really got to seize the day, carpe diem, you know. And then what that means to the world isn't what seizing the day means to a spiritual practitioner. Seizing the day is somehow distracting yourself enough as much as possible so that you don't realize that you're going to die. That seems like what, hey, we're going to die. Like you get around folks, someone's died young, and you get around these folks and you start talking about, yeah, you could die at any time. We got to take advantage. I got to take that trip. I got to make sure I get to Egypt and see the pyramids before that's my time. We get this bucket list together, as if like, oh, I have to do all of these things, before, I pass away. So it cues us, instead of cueing us to think like, oh, well, what's that going to mean? Where am I going to go? What's going to happen then? It cues us to say, wow, I've got to really distract myself until that happens and create a bucket list, create this thing that we think we're in life instead of marching towards the end of it. And the Lam Rim allows us to not say, oh my gosh, it allows us to be realistic about what's really going on. So when the snap of a finger of this life goes by, fast, even if you get your 100 years, it goes by fast. I mean, there's many of us on here, different generations. And for me, it's like a train just going so fast now. I don't even know. Is November already? It's not October. We just had Halloween. I thought that it was June. What do you mean? Are the kids in school? Like really, like time is just going by so quick. It's just going by so quick. And we see it as if it's so static and we're in this time. And I was just reading a commentary. It says this we feel like, I was younger. I was older. But this I is just beginningless. It's just whoever we think we were then. It wasn't an older one or a younger one. It's just whoever it was. It's just so funny when we start to think about it. I thought it was so profound. I was reading it in this one of the previous Ganden Tree Rinpoche's commentary about the I and how it's totally realistic to do deity yoga. And it's not saying, oh, I'm imagining myself as Buddha, so that's crazy. It's like thinking black is white. No, it's just thinking that the I is then being designated onto what we will all become. We will all become Buddha. So it's not like black will become white. It's not thinking, oh, like something opposite. It's thinking about this evolution that will take place, and that I is going to be Buddha. The I was 3. The I is now. The I will die. The I will be an ant. The I can just be Buddha. It's whoever is being designated upon those parts. There's no difference. Buddha doesn't get out of emptiness. He doesn't like have a pass on the lack of inherent existence and somehow inherently exist, although some schools would like to think this. Buddha's empty of inherent existence, dependently originates, designated Buddha, and an emanating, an enjoyment body or an emanating body. There's a body there that's named an enjoyment body in dependence upon 32 major marks and 80 minor marks. There's an emanation body that's designated in dependence upon whatever he or she is emanating. But it doesn't get out of that. So it's just the I that's designated. So it's chef's choice once again. What do we want? Do we want one that's I'm the ant or I'm the Buddha? So it's the evolution that hasn't taken place for the ant, and the Buddha, the evolution took place. The I is now designated on purity instead of designated on contaminated. Still an I designated, but nothing more, but nothing less, just the middle. That's it. So tonight we're talking about the material that, wow, will allow us to loosen our grip on this idea of permanence, allow us to loosen our grip on this idea that the I inherently exists, the self of person inherently exists. It allows us to loosen the grip on the fact that phenomena, everything else besides person inherently exists. This hand, the couches, all these things inherently exist. So this material allows us to combat those things, this idea that things are permanent or not, this idea that things are inherently existent, they're not. And these two ideas make us drunk and think that cherishing ourselves is the way to go. And that disregarding others makes the most sense. Because I view myself as permanent and I view myself as inherently existent. And then I make a line of demarcation between me and you. My needs are not what your needs are. My needs are my needs, no matter what. Because I grasp at myself as being permanent. I grasp at myself as being inherently existent. I don't see this momentary changing that's happening. I don't see it. I'm not willing to look at it. I'm not willing to entertain it. So therefore, I'm so unwilling to entertain it that something as simple as a cup that could just drop on the ground and shatter to pieces, if it's the right brand, and if it's old enough, could make my mind so disturbed to just make sure it's okay and protect it. And not even seeing that the thing's breaking every moment anyway. And of course, it's going to eventually fall to pieces sometime or another. Of course, it's already breaking right now, right in front of me. But I don't see this subtlety. And again, Jeffrey Hopkins says, is once you start to see that subtlety, and I think I mentioned this before, but I thought it was so profound. Once you see this subtlety, it's like death. Yeah. Well, of course, it's been dying, now you're dying more. I mean, he says that you would be able to be sitting there and then just all of a sudden fall into a sinkhole and expect that this would be the thing that would happen. You would expect it because you'd see everything's moving so fast. It's just moving so fast and changing and disintegrating and just disintegrating. And then this body's going and then another body's coming. And then just this kind of dance of impermanence going on. Be expected. It would just be so expected that, oh yeah, of course, everything's falling apart. Oh, of course, someone died young. People die young. If there was a phenomena where people didn't die young, then you'd say, oh my gosh, someone died young. Well, people die young. People die in the womb. People die at 5. People die at 10. People die at 50. People die at 120. There's no specialty. And it's like so shocking or something. But if we understood impermanence even at the gross level, it wouldn't be that shocking. And at the subtle level, it wouldn't shock us at all. Because it's a phenomenon that occurs. What's so surprising about it? We just haven't thought about it enough, so it surprises us. When, it doesn't surprise you that the sun comes up and goes down. It would surprise you if it didn't. Because you're so familiar with it coming up and coming down. But why is it that we see people dying all around us? We don't think we're going to. Such a strange thing. And it's because of this grasping. There's obviously something. I mean, just that one example. I never even really thought about it. I just said it. But just that one example. This expectation isn't there the same way as other things that are so set in our life that happen all the time that we just expect. We expect that certain things are going to happen because a certain thing happened. We hit put the key in the ignition and turn it. We expect that the car is going to turn on because that's what happens. But when a body breaks or someone's life ends prematurely, this is what happens to bodies. They break. And this is what happens to some. They end prematurely. But it's as if it's so surprising to us because we haven't familiarized ourselves with it. So we start to loosen our ideas around everything that's kind of messed up about our perceptions. And this allows us to have more ease and peace throughout our day, and then eventually have the most ease and peace. And that's the one that the Buddha has, where the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience are all gone. Not only those things that make us all suffer are gone for the Buddha, but also those subtle self-cherishing stains that are still left for someone who's an arhat in an abiding nirvana are also removed. So the Buddha's mind can just flow freely to the entire universe in a blissful way and be the most reliable, perfectly wise being in the universe, most loving, compassionate, powerful, skillful being in the universe. And we will all become this being. And we'll be called Buddha instead of Jeff. This is it. We just have to evolve into a being that's labeled accurately as an awakened one. We have to wake up. Then we're named awakened one. We're named Buddha. Once we wake up, we just need to wake up. And we're fortunate that tonight we're learning about how to do so. We're studying calm abiding, and we're going through the stages of the path in a way that we could truly take this 14 stanzas, after these series of teachings and, looking at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And then hopefully, if we're fortunate enough, looking at the great treatise on the stage of the tantric path to enlightenment, truly have a life practice that we can count on. And that if everything evaporates around us, I mean, that's not likely to happen. We're suddenly the last person in the world, and all we have is our practice. We'll know what to do. We won't like it. I'm not saying that, oh, this is great that something like this has happened. We wouldn't, unless we're really advanced practitioners, feel that way. But my point is that we would know what to do if all of the books, if we really get to know this material and know how to work with it in our day, then our mind, as Diglo Khyentse Rinpoche, is filled with the things that are our teacher. Diglo Khyentse Rinpoche says, our mind becomes our teacher. It's filled with this information. Your teacher's your teachers, your books are your teacher, and then your mind becomes your teacher. So we need to get, as individuals, as practitioners, to a point where we have that kind of confidence, where we are self-sustaining. We don't feel like if we don't rush off to some initiation or some sort of puja, we don't rush off, that we're not going to be okay. We'll feel okay because we know what to do. So this is just some advice. So this is the material we're going to talk about. So let's just imagine that we bring all sentient beings here to be our guests, that we can share this teaching about the three types of beings, the teachings for beings of three capacities, small, medium, and great. It's so fortunate that we could be anywhere in the universe to hear this kind of information that is the great nectar for our ears and our eyes, and so forth, because there is no other information that can bring us to the states of that we crave so much. All day and night, we want to be happy. We want to be free from suffering. We go about it getting those states in ways that don't produce it. And here we are tonight, among very few people, listening to the exact instructions that'll lead us to those states that we crave so much and actually bring us to them in a way that won't change. So imagine you bring hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods here as your guests, leaving none aside, bringing them here and relating to them in the way that you do when you do your meditations on the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing and exchanging self with others. Really, really thinking about that pre-step to the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment of equanimity, and how that step of equanimity relates to the equalizing self and others step, and equalizing and exchanging self with others practice of bodhicitta. And I know this may sound complicated if anybody's new on some of the other applications, but I know some of Rinpoche's older students are here and know exactly what I'm talking about when we combine these lineages of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from Lord Maitreya to his Sangha, with the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna. Of course, the extensive deeds lineage, the practice of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, also passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni. So Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Sangha, and then the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna, etc. And then ending up at, of course, Shantideva, where we see so much of that practice passed down in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So we think about, when we bring all sentient beings here, those methods and those practices, so that we're really doing it in a way that is concrete and that has steps that can make our mind be more pliable and relate to more and more sentient beings. And as I said, whenever we go throughout our day, we try to take pictures in our mind of more and more beings so that we can bring them into our bodhicitta field, so that we can actually relate to more actual beings, as Kamalashila says, and we should do. In the stages of meditation, he talks about relating to actual beings, and then we can, fill it in as imagined beings. So we're bringing as many beings in as possible. So throughout our day, we see people, and we then say, oh, independence upon this person, I will become I will have more bliss, because the Buddha has as much bliss as possible, because the Buddha puts every being's need in the universe before his or her own. So now you've found another being who can increase your bliss and get you quicker to Buddhahood, who can allow you to really generate, this love and compassion that's going to be necessary to serve as precursors or pre-steps to an extraordinary attitude that allows you to then, know you need to become a Buddha. And then you'll have more beings to work with on the Bodhisattva path, and then eventually connect to every single sentient being in the universe because of this pathway that you practice, starting whenever you start, say tomorrow, where you're walking around and you now have 2 more sentient beings that, when you're meditating on love and compassion and wanting them to have happiness and the causes of happiness and free from suffering and the causes of suffering, you have more of those beings that you can relate to in that manner. And it makes your mind more expansive. That love becomes more expansive, and you become more like a Buddha when you do this. And why do you become more like a Buddha? Because you become more like a bodhisattva. And the bodhisattva is the only type of being that turns into a Buddha directly through their path. So profound. These teachings are so profound. If we really, really look at them and try to apply them to our lives, we see how profound they are, and how we can just go deeper and deeper into these simple concepts that Khyentse Geshe Wandak taught us. We can just go deeper and deeper and deeper and extract that real kind of precious thing that's in there, which is our mind turning into the mind like a Khyentse Geshe Wandak. Really. And it'll be in dependence upon these exact instructions. So we bring hell, hungry ghosts, animal, human, demigods, and gods here, leaving out none. And we all imagine that we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. In the language of the gods, nagas, and yakshas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Now we'll get into the 7-point Vairocana posture and just do a little bit of breathing meditation to just try to get our minds to a more realistic place. We've started to set our motivation at the beginning of the teaching and know that we're so blessed to be able to have these teachings in our lives. We're so blessed to be able to learn how to get rid of our afflictive obstructions and get rid of the obstructions to omniscience. We're so fortunate. We can figure out how to stop having our minds be so disturbed. The afflictions are kind of these things that just disturb our mind, and the Buddha's shown us how to get rid of these afflictions. So right now, let's just try to calm our minds down enough to be able to hear this information as thoroughly as possible. Imagine that all sentient beings are joining you in this calming meditation, where we're going to just, as our focal object, focus on the breath, breathing in and out, and the counting. And we're only going to focus on that. So we're not going to focus on anything else. And if we see our mind straying to other things and breathing in and out and counting, the spy in our mind will catch it, and mindfulness will grab the breathing in and out and counting back and bring it to the center. And if we see ourselves getting sleepy and dull and kind of, zoning out, we're going to allow that. We're going to let the spine in our mind catch it and say, mindfulness, grab the object and bring it back to the focal point. We want a very, very calm, stable, clear state of mind when we're engaging in this practice. So we're breathing in, breathing out, and we're counting. And this will allow us to get our minds to a place where we can hear the teachings in a complete way, so that then we can later analyze the teachings and integrate them into our lives through meditation. Now, with that calm, clear mind, imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni appears in the space in front of you, about arm length away, size of your thumb at eye height, beautiful and radiant, moving around, three-dimensional, actual Buddha Shakyamuni, just quite small, because we're going to have the entire merit field begin to fill in the space in front of you. Imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni is containing the entire merit field, and all of the merit field begins to erupt out of Buddha Shakyamuni, who's been containing everything all in one, it's called. We start to see all the holy enlightened beings in the space in front of you. Imagining Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Khenso Geshe Wandak, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Demalocha Rinpoche, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso. Imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, Umzala Geshe Aga, Geshe Malatens and Ladrin. Imagining Jeffrey Hopkins. Imagining Chowder Rinpoche. All of these holy beings, any being that you consider holy, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, any being who you feel is an enlightened being, picture them in the space in front of you. Remembering His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's so kind to us to be in our world, is on a very, very firm throne surrounded by snow lions. Our source of protection, Chenrezig, in our world. Imagine the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dharma Kirti and Dignaga and Vamuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Salimpa and Lama Atisha. Imagining the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Balita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Baba Vega and Chandrashita and Kamalashila, Lama Salingpa and Atisha. Imagine these holy beings in the space in front of you. Just hearing their names should bring bliss to your mind, that you've been able to connect with beings who've taught the truth and spent their lives trying to present out of compassion to the world that which will allow us to get rid of the self-grasping ignorance and the self-cherishing attitude. We're so fortunate to know the names of those teachers who will show us and have shown us exactly what we need to do to evolve. Rejoice in these names as you hear them. We're so moved by them, even if we don't know it in our practice, because of the teachings that His Holiness the Dalai Lama gives, and Khenso Geshe Wandak has given us, and Geshe Lobsang Gompo gave us, now Geshe Dorje Damdu and Umzala Geshe Aga give us. We're just so fortunate, and Geshe Malaladrin and Jeffrey Hopkins. We're just so fortunate to have these teachers who present us with all of these holy beings' works, even if we don't know it. They're all in the nectar of the instructions that we've received. Imagining the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Buddha Vajradhara, Saraha, Matripa, Tilopa, Naropa, Lotsawa, Marpa, and Milarepa, and Gampopa. Imagining that Atisha is passing down the entire Lamrim lineage to Drone Tompa, imagining it's going on there in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate that this occurred. Just thinking about that time where there was a time when Lord Atisha was sitting in front of that lay practitioner, Drone Tompa, just like we sat in front of Khensa Rinpoche. You know, Jeffrey Hopkins always makes it so clear that we need to think in these terms when we, think about Lama Tsongkhapa sitting in a room with Kirtap J and Jelsop J and just teaching. Imagining Lord Atisha, it's not just some fairy tale, fictional figure. This is a being who sat in a room with Drone Tompa or sat outside, wherever it was, sat somewhere with Drone Tompa, a lay person, and said, "You are the one I trust to pass this entire lineage down to here," and transmitted the entire lineage to Drone Tompa of the Lam Rim. We're so fortunate. Think about it in these terms, the three old Kadampa lineages. Imagining the holy beings of Nyingma, Padmasambhava, Sakya, Sakya Kunga Nimpo, Sakya Pandita, the Kaju, the Karmapas, and so forth. Again, the Galupa lineage. Imagining Lama Tsongkhapa there. So wonderful Lama Tsongkhapa came into our world. We study so much of his work because of the kindness of Khensa Geshe Wandak. Imagining that Pension Sanandrapan, Vasuchuji Jetson, Kirtap J, Jelsop J, Jayan Cheba, Gonja Jimmy Wampo, Janja Rilpi Dorje, 7th Dalai Lama, Jitsumba, Purvajok, all of these holy beings that affect our lives, affect our minds, allow us to really look at these texts in a clear way, look at the general meaning of the text and the specific meanings of the texts. A meaning of word by word by word. We're so fortunate to have had teachers and have teachers who extract the essence out of each word, the Kangjur and the Tanjur, and all of these incredible Tibetan commentaries. Imagining all the beings, the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, and Action Tantra. All the holy beings, 35 Buddhas, all the protector deities. Now every sentient being in the universe is here with us. All of the enlightened beings are here. All sentient beings are here as our guests to be able to hear these holy teachings. These holy teachings that have only gone on because Buddha Shakyamuni was so kind to come to our world almost 2,600 years ago and teach the truth. And that the Nalanda Pandits were so kind to be able to look at these words of Buddha and look at all of the sutras, all of these pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and put them into a kind of different categories and show how the Buddha was teaching to all these varieties of capacities of beings, and help us to understand how each of them all fit into a framework, into a staircase that leads to complete Buddhahood. And then the Tibetan commentators that came and helped to clarify these things. And then these kind beings like Jeffrey Hopkins and Alan Wallace and Alexander Berzin and Robert Thurman and Thupten Jimba and Jules Levinson and Craig Preston and Young Bok and Sue Ann and some Catherine Rogers, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And any that I left out is just due to my ignorance and lack of being able to list more names at this very moment. We're so fortunate. So now rejoicing in that fortune and knowing that the one liberating path is the wisdom realizing emptiness. The aspirations are what will give rise to our destination. But what will actually allow it to occur is the liberating path of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So if we have renunciation only and don't have bodhicitta, but we have the wisdom realizing emptiness, we'll end up in an abiding nirvana. If we have renunciation and bodhicitta and couple those with the wisdom realizing emptiness, we'll have Buddhahood. So we see that no matter what we want to achieve, if it's out of samsara as an arhat of the lesser vehicle or of the great vehicle, we need the liberating path of the wisdom realizing emptiness. And it's the precise object of observation of the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena that is the object of observation for all the vehicles that is needed to have a liberating path. So it's the content of the Heart Sutra, even though the Heart Sutra is a Mahayana teaching. We'd say the second turning of the wheel of Dharma is taught to the bodhisattvas, and we know that the bodhisattvas become bodhisattvas through a specific path. You become a bodhisattva through getting aspiring bodhicitta that occurs through the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and getting the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. So we know that in talking to Chen Rezig, this bodhisattva became a bodhisattva. How should a bodhisattva, mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family, of the Mahayana lineage practice? So we know that all of these practices are contained within it. So this is a Mahayana teaching, but the emptiness that's spoken of, the nature of reality is the nature of reality. It doesn't change from one vehicle to the other. Even though the tenet systems have different views, they are incorrect in terms of their understanding of the nature of reality at a final level. Even the being who wants to just get out of cyclic existence for him or herself alone needs to understand the final view of emptiness. It's not adequate to just understand the lack of, the emptiness of the self of person or the selflessness of person. It's not adequate to only know that. And even some schools believe it's adequate to just know that the self isn't permanent, unitary, and independent. But the Prasangika school view is that that's not enough. And you can even have a yogic direct perception of impermanence, a yogic direct perception of the lack of a substantial autonomous reality. But that yogic direct perception isn't a perception of emptiness, is not put you on the path of seeing, even though you've had a yogic direct perception of a selflessness of a autonomous substantial self, this kind of selflessness. Even though you've had a direct perception of it, that's not the direct perception of emptiness. It's a very, very fine point, which is the direct perception of emptiness. And the emptiness of self and of phenomena is the same emptiness in the Prasangika school. So it's the emptiness of inherent existence of self, of person and phenomena. And this is the object of observation. That's the object of negation, the self of person and phenomena that abides in some way that has some sort of establishment by way of its own character. But here the Heart Sutra says that everything is empty of nature. It doesn't have this kind of character or characteristic from its own side that gives it some independent, substantial reality that's findable beyond a label, independence upon a collection. So the Buddha's selling us on this idea that everything exists externally only merely as a name in dependence upon a collection. Merely this way, but it does exist this way. And that's good enough for Nagarjuna, for things to exist. But it's a very, very subtle way that they exist. And it's not the way that it kind of sounds. It's not as, okay, yeah, there's just collections over here, of course, It's like a car at a factory and they melt some metal and they put it together. And of course, there's a bunch of parts there, and that's a car now when the parts come. It's something much more subtle than this kind of construction of things that then get named. It's really how the subject is making it all on a screen that is somehow just not is blank, but externally there, but blank. Chef's choice from the side of the projector. You turn the projector off, there's no projection. So this is what we have to come to figure out, how all that works with karma still. And we have to still be able to posit that karma is accumulated and that we can be reborn and that samsara has no beginning but has an end, and nirvana has a beginning but has no end. And we have to be able to posit how all of these things still function perfectly fine while being empty of the way that we think that they're functioning right now. So they function perfectly fine They just don't function the way that we think they're functioning. And the way that we think that they're functioning is from their side, our side. But it's really a functioning in dependence upon all of it. Tall, there's short. And if there was something really findably tall or findably short, as you got closer to short or tall, you should be able to inherently find a short or tall. But you've got to find, in order to find short, you've got to find somebody taller. In order to find tall, you've got to find somebody shorter. So when you get close to tall, you can't find it until you have something else there. If the mirage were real, as it appears to be water, as Nagarjuna says, those nearby should see water. So as you get closer to this thing that's so independent, it should be found within its parts or outside of its parts when it comes to the self of person or everything else. So the Heart Sutra says, good luck finding that thing. And you won't, but there's a thing. And until you realize how to posit that one entity can be empty of inherent existence and exist, till you can find one entity, like two sides of a coin, one side of the coin says it doesn't inherently exist, and the other side of the coin says it exists. Until you see these two as distinct, Tsongkhapa says you haven't realized what Buddha's talking about. It's until you stop seeing that these things can sit in one entity, conventional existence and lack of inherent existence in one entity at the same time. How this cup can be merely imputed in dependence upon a collection and exist conventionally while being empty of inherent existence. Sit here right in my hand while being empty of inherent existence and perform the function of holding this drink, and this drink can be drinkable. We have to be able to posit that there's a drink here that can be drinkable. We're merely designating in dependence upon a collection of fluid and glass and all these different things I'm designating. And that designation itself proves there's no inherent existence. So this designation that's happening, that is its subtle conventional existence, proves it doesn't inherently exist. So you have to be able to see that this one thing right here cannot inherently exist and exist, and that those things don't contradict each other. There's no contradiction in this existing and this not inherently existing. And if there's a contradiction in that statement, you're not able to see conventional and ultimate truth in one entity. Not able to see how you can posit appearance is a dependent origination. And therefore, if it's a dependent origination, it's not independent. Emptiness means empty of independence. So if it's a dependent origination, you see it doesn't exist inherently. And if you see that there's an emptiness, something that doesn't inherently exist, then there's something that dependently originates, and you should be able to posit existence. Even emptiness is dependent origination because it's an existent. So you can't even say emptiness is something that emptiness is empty, because it's a designation. So that's what Buddha's talking about in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And you can see how, if you could start to believe that, how everything would have a lot less value around you that makes you so crazy. You know, this thing you think you need so badly doesn't have the power from its own side that you're giving it. You're giving it. You're giving it. We even believe that. We even say like, oh yeah, you know, we really shouldn't, you know, let it have this power over me. But we don't even know what we're talking about. But think about it. We shouldn't let this have so much power over me. Well, that's all Nagarjuna and Buddha Shakyamuni are talking about. Well, no, you shouldn't, because you made it. How are you letting something you made give power? Doesn't even make sense. You made it. And then you think it's over there and you give it power. You really gave it the power in the first place because of your self-grasping attitude that projects it and sees it even from a sensory level as inherently existent somehow or another, riding next to the sense and the mental consciousness, riding next to each other with an imprint somehow, making me think, even with my sense consciousness, it's all there the way that it is. So when that happens, then I think that, man, this is all from over there and I have no control. So I have to start, trying to, as Shanti Davis says, you think that the only way that the world will become smooth is if you cover the whole thing with leather. If you cover it all with something soft, your external objects become your only focus on trying to make yourself feel better. The only way I can fix the way I feel is if I soften everything out there, when all we have to do is soften what's in here. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. I just screen shared. I don't know if that is necessary. I don't even know if we can do that tonight, but entered the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death. No suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced to praise the words of the Blessed One. Kala jube nejo damba ne nguje de ju ngai de de jenju ba ba la ma yi bu jin zi ne zong gan zhe zo la ja zi la aga zamara de jandara zamara be aga zamara jandara. Aga samara jandara samara ya be di adong gate gate paragate parasangate budi zo baba gonche so ji gai de me do ji je lo ba do ji me ba do ji je wa do ji ja gi ba ji me do be je na ji je de go ye zo ye na ja je 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 wa da me do ne be jan da ne wa da de ma ju jin bong zong zong jo ji da ji de jan den da de le sho. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready. Shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Profound, peaceful, elaboration-free, clear light, non-composite, such as the nectar-like Dharma I have discovered. Finding no one to fathom this teaching, in silence I will retire to the woods. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. The Guru is the Buddha, the Guru is the Dharma, the Guru is the Sangha, the Guru is the source of everything wholesome. I go for refuge to the Guru. Okay, so let's read through the source of all my good. And then we'll talk about calm abiding a little bit. Some of the stages that will help us, some of the meditations that will help us to be able to get our mind calmer and calmer, and to the point where we can really focus it on the most important thing in the world, and that's emptiness. But starting with emptiness isn't always our best bet when it comes to objects of observation of calm abiding, because it's a very subtle object, and it's very easy to just sit and kind of like space, and think we're meditating on emptiness if we're not really skilled at it. And we could even start out in the meditation of where we're trying to use emptiness as our object of calm abiding, and start out riding on the horse well, and have gotten to this non-affirming negative that we're somehow sitting in. And then maybe a few moments later, it's just easy for the untrained mind to kind of go from that place that's a vivid absence to, that I've never really gotten to, but I've had like ideas of what it could be like, if it was like kind of a moment of it, and then you can see though, how, if you're not really, really trained, it's hard to identify what isn't just what isn't just, kind of sleepy, just what isn't just kind of like a, whatever that almost asleep phase is, where it's just kind of, you're not asleep yet, but there's not really discursive thought. And it's really easy for your emptiness meditation, if you're not trained and don't really know how to do it well, to turn into that, if you're using it as your object for calm abiding. So, so we talked about, and I'll read the source in a minute, but we talked about, there's various objects of observation for your calm abiding. And if you have kind of a louder mind related to anger, or if it's really loud and attached, or full of ignorance, or pride, or jealousies, Gampopads, or discursive thought, then you may want to work on that a little bit. And I think that these instructions that are given here are really helpful, not only in terms of getting our minds to a point where we can get this calm abiding, to this mind that can focus on emptiness, because that's what we want to use it for. That's the tool we're building up for. We're building that tool for that only, so that we can see emptiness, so we can get our minds calm enough to have a liberating path. But in the meantime, that tool that we're building up will allow us to, anyway, I lost my train of thought, but that tool will allow us to practice other things that are really important. And some of the advice in that tool will help us to kind of get rid of our anger, which disturbs, this is my point, that disturbs our mind anyway, that gets rid of our attachments that disturbs our mind anyway. So these antidotes that are presented in this section on, behavioral kind of meditations, how to, it's under this category, not only help us to get calm abiding, but they help us so that our mind's not so disturbed. And there are specific antidotes that we can put in place when we start to have attachment and we think about ugliness, we think about impurity, and we start to have anger and we meditate upon love. These become direct antidotes that we can put, as soon as in the 8 verses from Training the Mind by Geshe Langritama, as soon as disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. And firmly facing it, this is anger. Averting it, applying an antidote. I'm attached, firmly facing it. Yeah, I'm attached. Facing the fact that I'm attached. Facing the fact that I'm angry. Facing the fact that I'm ignorant. Facing the fact that I'm jealous. Facing the fact that I'm prideful. Facing the fact that I can't get control of my mind. It's going here, there, and everywhere and full of discursive thought. Avert it, Langritamba says. How do you avert it? You apply an antidote. So this is what we're talking about in this section. How we would actually do that. What are you facing? We read these 8 verses. We read the 7-point thought transformation. We look at Lojong. We look at Atisha's text. And what do they really mean? Firmly face and avert it. Face it. Face the fact. You're attached. Face the fact. You are an angry person. Avert it. Apply an antidote. This is what it means. So we're learning how to apply antidotes more and more and more. And we got through attachment. And now we're moving on to this kind of anger or aversion. And I promised everybody we'd focus on something that we're going to do tonight. So I will do that. Source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me to see first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs, the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant me that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant me that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well, the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortune and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them even at the cost of my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the reign of obstacles, things within me or outside me now that could stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. So we are talking about a union of calm abiding and special insight, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, and the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. So we see, there's a differentiation made. When we look at in the Lamrim Chemo, there are objects of meditation, and there's universal objects. There's 4 different objects of meditation that are pointed out. And it says the Bhagavan stated the yogis, there's 4 types of object of meditation: universal objects, objects of meditation for purifying your behavior, objects of meditation for expertise, and objects of meditation for purifying afflictions. And then it gets into universal objects, and it talks about discursive and non-discursive. And it says in terms of when we're thinking of discursiveness or thought or analysis, this is related to insight, and non-discursiveness is related to serenity. And it says that the image is not the actual specifically characterized object upon which your mind is focused, but rather the appearance of that object's aspect to your mind. When you carry out analysis while observing an object, then the image is discursive, since analytical thinking is present. So we're not using analysis when we're using this calm mind. We're trying to fix it. When we're talking about calm abiding, we're talking about calming the mind from peace, calm, or having pacification of external distraction, and having the mind abide on something internally. So we're saying that having our mind being distracted to wrong objects, and these are objects that are external objects. These are internal things which we're trying to cultivate. But it says in the Lamrim that we have to first, work on what kind of object dominate, we have to work with an object that helps with the things that dominate our mind that are negative. So it says in Asanga Shravaka levels, it says Rivata, if attachment, so it says in the Lamrim Chemo, I'm jumping around because I'm using a lot of sources, but in the Lamrim Chemo, it says, who should meditate on which objects? So it says, as there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with a preponderance of discursiveness. So from here to there, so that if you look at the way Tsongkhapa lists it, he lists 5. It begins with attachment and ends with discursiveness. So he's saying from here to there, from attachment to hatred to ignorance and pride, and Gampopa adds jealousy, all the way to discursiveness. There's all those kinds of folks out there. And good news is the Buddha gave all kinds of antidotes for all these kind of folks out there. And the Shravaka levels by Arya Sangha, we can find this point. So it says, in answer to a question of Rivata in the Sangha Shravaka levels, Rivata, if attachment uniquely dominates the behavior of a monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, then he focuses his mind on the object of meditation of ugliness, as we talked about. If hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates his behavior, then he meditates on dependent arising of this condition. If pride dominates his behavior, he focuses his mind on differentiation of all the constituents there are. And if discursiveness uniquely dominates his behavior, then he focuses his mind on an awareness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. In this way, he focuses his mind on an appropriate object of meditation. So here, let's see something real quick. Why not? Let's be fancy a little bit if we can. Let's see what this sutra is exactly. All right. So we're not going to use that. We're just going to move on. I didn't know if there's going to be this source citing for this, but it's not clear. And then Asanga Shravaka levels also states, in this regard, persons whose behavior is dominated by attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, or discursiveness should for a while at the outset just purify those behaviors by contemplating objects of meditation for purifying behavior. So you see here, it talks about, dealing with the bad stuff first, dealing with the worst stuff first. So after this, we'll see the stability. After this, they will see the stability of their minds, and still will ascertain only their objects of meditation. So they should definitely persevere at using their objects of meditation. Thus, you should certainly work with these objects of meditation. And then it goes into, well, if your behavior is balanced, then you should do this, then you should do that. But it really gives you a taste of what the point of it is here. The point of it is making an individual recipe. You know who you are. Face it. Face who you are and start to work with who you are. And if who you are is a Buddha, you have nothing to do. You're perfect. But if who you are has some facet that's so far away from the Buddha compared to other facets, then that's the thing you have to kind of deal with first, because it's so much louder than everything else. You need to get it to a point where it's not as loud. And that's the point that's being made. So if you have this huge amount of attachment, Gampopa says, if it's attachment to physical forms and bodies and things like this, and our body. He talks about, thinking about pus and blood and the layers of the skin and going down to the skeleton, and says going to carnal grounds and sitting there with bones and getting this idea in our minds about impurity. And, Shantideva, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, gives us tons of ideas. And Nagarjuna in the Precious Garland gives us tons of ideas on how we can meditate on impurity. And then just meditate on the general, when we look at things that aren't the bodies and stuff, just the general, the cars rust and things they don't have this kind of pure sense of staying the way that we think they will, all shiny and great from our side, and our projection makes it always. So we think, can we get realistic? So that was, we got over the ugliness one. And when we read Shantideva, we have to remember Shantideva is talking to monastics, males. So he's talking about the dirty, ugly, disgusting female body. But Kensar Geshe Wandak said 100,000 times. This also, we think about the male body. Shantideva wasn't if he was speaking to a woman, he would say the male body is disgusting and full of this and gross. And, if you think it's so wonderful to hug because it's soft, go hug. Why don't you then feel the same way about this? Shantideva. So Rinpoche said that when we look at these things that start to quell our attachment and our desires, we have to make it applicable to all human bodies. And then in the case of some of these texts, so many people have said, why are they saying that women are, well, he's talking to guys, they got a problem with thinking the women's not so dirty, thinking so clean, it's so great all the time. So Shantideva's got an audience, just like Buddha had an audience at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma and told everyone the Four Noble Truths truly exist. That was the audience he was talking to. The next turning of the wheel of Dharma, he said, scratch that. Anybody who was there at the first turning, I wasn't drunk, by the way. I was just talking to a certain group of people who needed to hear it a certain way. Scratch that. Nothing truly exists. So the second thing that we get to in these negativities is this hatred problem we have in our minds, anger that comes out of nowhere. And Gampopa in the Jewel Ornament for Liberation talks about, okay, if that's a problem, if you know who you are, if you're that person who's angry all the time, here's what you should do: meditate upon love. And he says something that's interesting. He says, meditate. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get to it a little bit. He says, meditate on in the three types of love. It's the first one. So then it's like, well, what's Gampopa talking about? Then you have to go back in the text. And he's talking precisely about the same thing that Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about in relation to compassion. So love in Gampopa, in the text case, love that takes sentient beings as its object, and then love that takes phenomenal reality as its object, and love that takes no reference as its object. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way, we find an incredible commentary that on this first part of Chandrakirti's text, where he pays homage to great compassion. And there's an explanation of these three levels of compassion. And I just can't help myself. And I'm not going to do it all tonight, but we'll start there next time. I can't help myself. I know we're talking about calm abiding, but Gampopa said that there's an antidote to hatred, which is love. And he said there's 3 kinds of love. And then he said, we're talking about the first kind of love. And so we need to sort all of that out a little bit. And then we have to question why it can't be the third type of love. And we'll leave that question out there once we get to it. Or why can't it be the third type of compassion? So just basically in a nutshell, when we look at what these 3 are, one is just observing sentient beings. So at the beginning of Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, it says, first, with the thought, I am, they cling to a self. Then, with the thought, mine, they become attached to things. Like buckets on a water wheel, they turn without control. I bow to the compassion that cares for such suffering beings. So here, such suffering beings, compassion that has sentient beings as its object. Nothing more than these suffering sentient beings. Then the next part, the compassion that has phenomena as its object, is misinterpreted a lot. And Lama Tsongkhapa says so, and says, we've got to get this under control. The object we're talking about is still the sentient being. And this kind of cognitive aspect of wanting that sentient being, in the case of love, to have happiness and its causes. And in the case of compassion, to be free from suffering and its causes. So this cognitive state, this love and compassion, is still seeing a being to have happiness or be free from suffering, depending on if it's love or compassion. I think you get it. But in the case of the first, it's just seeing the sentient being who's suffering, and you want them to have happiness and be free from suffering. The next case, it's an impermanent sentient being that you want to have happiness, the cause of happiness and freedom from suffering. That's the love and compassion that takes phenomenal reality as its object. Phenomenal reality just means impermanence. It doesn't mean it's taking impermanence as its object. It just means it's upping the ante on the sentient being. It's now seeing that sentient being that suffers as impermanent. It's not as impermanent. It's seeing a suffering, impermanent sentient being that you want to have happiness and the causes of happiness and be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So it says beings are like reflections of the moon rippling in water. This impermanence. Seeing sentient beings, you want to have happiness and be free from suffering, not only as these poor creatures over there, but these poor impermanent creatures over there. And then this compassion or love that takes no reference as his object is seeing them as fleeting and devoid of intrinsic nature. Seeing this impermanent, empty, sentient being and wanting them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering and have happiness in the causes of happiness. So you get to this idea of emptiness of action, agent, and object within the compassion and the love. You see how it kind of gets you there? Gets you from like object of just a suffering being, an impermanent suffering being, an empty, impermanent suffering being. So this is what it means. We'll get more into it. Tsongkhapa gets into detail. He got me a little lost, and then I got back on the horse. I was reading it, and then I was like, oh, okay. I got a little nervous for a second, but that's how Tsongkhapa is. It's so subtle at times that, you know, if you don't really hone in on what he's saying, you can miss the point altogether. And Tsongkhapa says, everyone misses this point, by the way. They think that the observation of this compassion is observing impermanence. It's observing the sentient being that is that. It's just a characteristic that's added on to this being. Yeah, they're suffering, they're impermanent, they're empty too. It's just a characteristic that you're identifying within that object of observation, that you want to have happiness and want to be free from suffering. It's just another characteristic. Okay, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And these points, they seem like kind of like tricky little catchy points, but it starts to loosen even as you start to think about it in this way. Man, I want that person to have happiness. And you start to see they're impermanent. And you start to see they're empty. It stops a clinging and starts you to be able to more realistically work with that person and start to see that, this person, it just, more about them. More about, they can change, and it is pliable, and they may not have much time, and it just adds elements. I better say something now. Death will come. Nothing can stop it. I don't know when it's going to happen. The only thing that can help is Dharma. Everything's moving so fast. There's that being that's suffering, and they're moving so fast towards more suffering. And they're empty, moving towards fast, so much suffering. It just adds a different dynamic to it. And it gets into like layers and deeper layers of how bodhisattvas at different levels work within these aspects. Gampopa got into it, and I wasn't ready to present it. But anyway, we're really fortunate that we have at least a shot, because we have these books and we have these teachers that can help us undo this thing that we've had since beginningless time. That's an error. It's just an error in all of our thinking. And it just saturates our senses and our mental consciousness. Sense consciousness, mental consciousness just saturates it since beginningless time. And thank goodness we're all here tonight and we're undoing it together. I'm not undoing it for you. I couldn't possibly do that. If that was possible, someone a lot better than me could show up. The Buddha could just come undo me, undo you. Then I'd stop talking, and then you'd stop having to listen, and it'd just be a big undoing, because I'm only doing this to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, because I want not like, oh, I'm a bodhisattva. Like I'm selfish. I hear what Buddhas do. I hear what you get when you get to Buddhahood. That's why I want that. I want the lottery that you definitely win. If you do, like, you buy this ticket and that ticket and that ticket, you could never ever really win the lottery, like, for sure. But if you do this, and this and this, you can win the lottery forever. It's like amazing, and it's just it brings so much joy to my heart to know that that's the case. And that I'm presenting authentic Dharma. I'm presenting something that Khensa Geshe Wandak presented that is flawless, that will work. That if you take these texts that I'm talking about and look at them yourself, you'll be able to, start to kind of have these broader ideas about the Dharma that I feel so fortunate to slowly but surely get enough of a little taste that it keeps me coming back for more. A prayer for the flourishing of Jitsongkapa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds through the may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Nirketu, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage through this truth. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. The lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave a conch and prophesied through this truth. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. His pure view free of attorney and instruction, his pure meditation cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct practiced according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverend, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating all for beings in the doctrine. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures definitive and interpretive were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Listening to the explanation of the three Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the three highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages practice, he outlined without class the two stages of Sutra and without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the Conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish, combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, heart essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the Conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings paths, the quick-acting Lord Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the Conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of the glorious Guru's lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverent holders of the teaching, and by the increase of power of its patrons, may the Conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. And through the power of this truth, may Gen Nenden Jambel Drapala, Jeffrey Hopkins, Professor Jeffrey Hopkins, have all obstacles removed. It looks like so far, so good. And let us rejoice in that and continue to pray for his health and removal of any obstacles to us being able to continue to get teachings from such a qualified master. A concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. But anyone who's following this, he made it through the surgery and he's okay so far, but it's very dangerous surgery. So we just have to keep praying and keep hoping that the couple of years that he may be able to get, or a few years, or who knows, maybe 10 or 20 years, are there so that we can continue to see these translations come out. And especially the work he's doing on Tantra. We'll just leave it at that. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Azandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize. I unknowingly made them. May they be purified by the mantra of Vajrasattva, imagining the Vajrasattva in the space in front of you, inseparable from your root Lama, and imagining light rays and nectars are showering down on you and all sentient beings, transforming into white Oms, red Ahs, blue Hums, and purifying yours and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind, respectively. Om benzo sata samaya manubalaya benzo sata zeneva jijadita meva zutagaya meva zubagaya meva anurag meva savaziri me braja sava kamasuchi me gitam triyam guru hum ha 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 ho bhagavan sava tathagata benzo mame maka benzo bhava mahasamaya sava ahom eh. May we always be protected by Paul the Lama. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Jamo Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jai Rama Jai Kadar Rama Jai Jai Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Jo Rama Tun Jo Kadar Jai Mo Rama Jai Jai Jo. Anyone who's having obstacles to meeting with the Dharma, may it be pacified by the Drapasundri mantra. Om Vajrabani Hare Griva Garuda. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. Whatever dedication is praised is supreme by all the conquerors to traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May we not be separated in any of our lives from Chenrezi. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may stay until samsara's end. And may all the holy lamas who are aging please stay in this world and remain to be able to continue to pass on this pure lineage of instruction that's been passed down in an unbroken way from Buddha Shakyamuni. And a prayer of supplication to Rinpoche, my root teacher, many of our root teacher. So fortunate. Complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms as the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed a complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar to our ears and elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now the sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove the miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts in crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Don't forget, on YouTube, we have all of these things downloaded. And, if you go on it and you like it and you press a like, then I think that it helps with the algorithm to get the teachings out to more people. And that's really all we're trying to do, is try to get the teachings out to as many people as possible. And, in this world where there's so much addiction to stimulation, the idea of giving up, on that and, moving towards the spiritual path is something very rare. And if there's someone out there who wants to know what a spiritual path is about, then I want them to be able to have access to those teachings that were so freely given to me. So the causes and conditions make that happen. So thank you, all of you, for listening. And it's at Buddha's Center on YouTube. All right. See ya. See you on Sunday. Thank you so much.